So the question is, we got rents dropping, we got supply through the roof in December. Now what? That's chaos. And when we look at the review of how we ended 2020, there is a lot of that chaos. But what now? Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates, and you're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Why does Toronto have the highest damn rent arrears in the entire country? And will COVID show us how to build better housing? And to wrap it all off, what small towns are people moving to when they flee the great city of Toronto? We're going to cover all of those and more. As an investor and a broker myself, I want to know, and I track the news to keep in the loop with everything going on with COVID and the local market. And we like to have fun along the way. Last night, our family, we decided to order some sushi, which we haven't done in quite a while. I'm amazed that I'm not a hefty person after all these years, man. For a while, I actually thought I found a replacement for my love of fish. But alas, it was only temporary. The only sushi I'm not a fan of is the one with the rice on the inside of the seaweed wrap. It's just not how I roll. Anyways, if you guys could, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. Download the last 5 episodes if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And I really appreciate the support. Let's see if we can get to 50 likes today. Okay, let's get into some fun here with this conversation of why Toronto has the highest rent arrears in Canada. That's right. That is a fact. NowToronto.com starts us off today. Toronto has the highest rent arrears in 2020, according to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, our friends over at CMHC. The numbers are staggering. 10.68%, or just under 35,000 of all units for rent. That adds up to $55 million in total rent arrears in Toronto. And you wonder why small landlords are getting a little bit frustrated. Well, Toronto rent was affected disproportionately large share of lower paid hospitality and service sector workers who lost their jobs last year. And this is very much the explanation as to why it was Toronto that suffered a big chunk when it comes to lack of payment or arrears accumulating. In fact, in November, Statistics Canada reported 74% of all accommodation and food services business reported layoffs, more than half of their employees laid off, 74%. And in Toronto, there are 329,000 people who generally work in tourism, hospitality, and related services. And it definitely includes sushi restaurants. They're running a fishy business. So let's go wider. Let's look at Ontario. Where do the stats take us? Well, Ontario posted the highest arrear rate among the provinces at 10.18, very much similar to Toronto, approximately $87 million in arrear as of October 2020, which is crazy when we put that in light of Toronto being 55. So Ontario is 87 million, and in Toronto specifically is a huge chunk at 55 million in arrears. When we go outside even further, we look across Canada nationally, we have a 6.11% of all totals, just under 2 million rental units were in arrears. Don't tell me there's no risk to investing as a landlord in Canada. There absolutely is. In fact, vacancy rates shot up to 3.2% for all bedroom types from 2 in 2019. That's across Canada. We saw that vacancy changing. Here's some of the factors that they give out of CMHC. This is Bob Dugan, the chief economist. Lower international migration, fewer student renters, and weaker employment conditions led to weaker inflows of new renters. While vacancy rates increase in many centers, we continue to see a need for more rental supply to ensure access to affordable housing. We're going to talk about what housing will look like in the future as well. But the vacancy rate, when we look specifically in Toronto, reached a 14-year high. That is 3.4% for the year, according to CMHC, and 5.7% for the fourth quarter, according to Urban Nation. We have bad vacancy rates, and we talked about some of those numbers on our podcast being over 5. That is killer. That is killer if you're running any sort of rental apartment space in the city. So then we're going to jump over to Blogto to look at it from different angles. I like to put many articles together to get a feel for what exactly is going on. The article reads, new report shows Toronto tenants had the most trouble paying their rents in 2020. So they say this, though other assessments of the industry found that rents in Toronto fell drastically for the 12 months in a row, and we've talked about that. In fact, we're going to get another article that mentions that as well, from the average of 2019. The CMHC says if they weren't already contradicting us enough, that rent actually went up. And not just went up, they went up in Toronto. Interesting. They say the city went up by 4.7% to 1523. Now, anybody who tracks the market would sit back and think, wait a minute, 2 bedrooms in Toronto are an average 1523. And they say it's based on their own figures for 2-bedroom units specifically. It's in direct contradiction to what we're hearing from a lot of rental apartment providers, people that survey it. And so if I were to sit back from what I know of CMHC's data on rent rates, their rents tend to be significantly less. I know when we're looking at getting apartments, we use CMHC as the standard for what is the average rent rate in the area, what are the vacancies. And I do tend to find that their rent rates are lower. So maybe they're playing a bit of catch up in that their numbers have increased. But when we look outside of CMHC stats, we clearly see rent dropping in the city, even in the 2 bedrooms. We'll talk about that later in the show. But out of all urban centers in the country, Toronto is tied with Vancouver for having the least amount of affordable housing. So not only are we seeing this weird thing where we got a vacancy increase, and it would seem this was to benefit the tenants, but we have the least amount of affordable housing. So there are people groups getting left behind. Listen to this. There's just 0.2% of the rental universe in Toronto and Vancouver are affordable. 0.2% affordable in the first quintile of income. The point is that, yes, we have housing. Yeah, they say CMHC says goes up, but realistically, we see rent rates coming down. But all the while, there's no affordable housing. At the same time, we see fewer renters having moved. Interesting. Despite predominant reports of cheaper rent on average, as well as other rental incentives in many Canadian cities, fewer people seem to actually take advantage of deals and move in 2020 than in 2019. Only 14% of units saw a change in renters compared to 17.3% in 2019. How interesting. It's interesting to see people aren't moving, given it's the best time, if any, to do it. Heck, just go across the street to another building and your rent goes down 20%. But I guess everyone's got their reasons. You know why the sushi crossed the road? Sushi could get to the other side. But in the meantime, look at these numbers. TorontoStories.com also taking similar, and I don't want to repeat myself, so this is all going to be new, even though it's covering the same topic. You're gonna get more here. Toronto, home to more than 1/3 of Canada's 150 million in rental arrears. But listen to this. CMHC says 32.5% of apartment owners reported their arrear rates have remained similar, but 58.3% said it was higher, and almost 10% found it was lower. So the majority of landlords have said that in Toronto, apartments have had more units go into arrears. It is affecting the majority of landlords. And it's not consistent across the GTA. There was a Blogto article that actually was called Brampton Sees Increase in Average Rent as Toronto Prices Continue to Decline. They give a couple reasons for it. They say part of the rise can be attributed to the change in composition of listings with more townhomes, condo apartments. But generally speaking, the GTA is seeing rent declines as well. I think the other one was Oshawa. That was very minor, like a 2% increase. Other than that, in the GTA as a whole, the average asking rent for all property types was down for the 13th straight month for all property types. Remember, 1-2 bedroom. Don't rely too heavily on the one news source saying CMHC calls for an increase in 2-bedroom rents. It's simply not true. Declining more than 16% year over year for an average of $2,020. So we see rents dropping. So if this is such a good time to rent, why do people choose to buy? Right? And this is where I want to go from here. BetterDwelling.com had an article. Canadians are paying big premiums to own instead of rent. And I don't think there is question of this, at least not from our listeners. We've said this a while ago in other capacities, but listen to this. CMHC analysis shows the gap between the cost of owning and renting in 2020. Carrying costs in the largest markets are now almost double that of paying rent. God forbid us for wanting to pay down a mortgage instead of somebody else's. GTA real estate has the biggest gap between owning and renting. Condo apartment owners are paying 86% more to own than rent in a purpose-built building in 2020. It's down from its peak in 2018 due to climbing market rents and falling interest rates. However, it's still 60% higher than it was just in 2015. This is the biggest premium paid in any Canadian real estate market. Yet, for whatever reason, people want to own in Toronto. Torontonians have sold their flesh to the cannibalistic sushi shop. I guess you could say we're on a roll. Or would that be ramen? Moving on. But have we just lost our mind with this obsession for real estate? Maybe. A Financial Post article would say we have. While the world is in the midst of a tech revolution, Canadians bet on real estate. The early days of Canada's housing boom was exhilarating. Eventually, though, it became troubling. Like bed spins, debt levels climbed to record levels, forcing government intervention. Now, the addiction is simply embarrassing. How embarrassing? The world is in the midst of a transformative shift to a digital, carbon-neutral economy, a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. And where are Canadians placing their bets? Houses, for the most part. And this is really what the article goes on to say, right? There's a difference in the investments that we see. Housing accounted for 37% of overall investments, while business spending on machinery and equipment and intellectual property dropped to 28.2%. We see a much larger spread. People want to invest in housing, whether you agree with it or not. That is the trend. That is the addiction that we face here in Canada, which really, from what we talked about the other day, puts us well ahead as far as prices and stability than the market that we've seen in the recent past in the US. But housing now accounts for about 14% of Canada's economic output, compared with about 12% that we saw at the end of 2008. Oh, a good old year that was, huh? John Pasalis would say, having avoided the U.S. housing bust of 2008, many Canadians came to see the country's housing market as bulletproof, a surefire long-term investment in a country that keeps upping its immigration levels while throwing roadblocks in the way of new construction. What a great quote. But we know, because we've seen it time and again, just jump quickly over to any real estate board and you'll see that they want housing to be the train that saves our economy. That's where we start, right? But what does this leave? Where does this leave our country? Does it leave us maybe less competitive? The most delicious economies need balance. You can't do salmon sashimi all the time. Have you ever tried whale sushi? It's killer. All right, so that's a little bit about the craziness happening in the rental space, the addiction we have to housing prices and all of that chaos that leaves many landlords in arrears. But will COVID show us how to build better housing? This is going to be a fun segment. We're going to talk about this from different angles, starting with a Toronto.com article entitled, Will COVID Show Us How to Build Better Housing? How appropriate. As society inches back this year to some resemblance of pre-COVID life, individuals, policy, and decision makers are asking hard questions about our housing choices. Is vertical living viable or desirable going forward? And you as investors are probably, if you're like me, struggling with wrapping your head around this entire situation. How do we build healthier communities and how do we bridge the gap in our housing system? But the bigger question is, when it relates to the city and Toronto specifically, will people regret leaving? This article has to say this. Whether some of those exiting the city will come to regret it when the world opens up again depends on the future affordability of Toronto, the ability of the suburbs to provide attractive, vibrant neighborhoods. So those 2 points would be the affordability of our city, the success of the neighboring cities, which we see are doing very well, of course, whether the employers continue to support work from home arrangements. And then work. Does work enable you to leave the city? And then CEO of the Ontario Home Builders Association, Joe Vaccaro, says this, and I think it's great as well. The $1 million question is, where are the employers going? That becomes the piece I'm trying to make sense of, he says. For that person between the age of 27 and 35 who have been living downtown for 5 or 6 years, I think they've had their fill. And we see that millennials moving outwards. Just from an affordability standpoint, what other choice do they have? So I want to take this from another angle when we look at housing. This missing middle crisis. Now Toronto.com says how to fix Toronto real estate missing middle problem. What is the missing middle? For anybody who's maybe never heard of that concept, it's this idea that people, they don't want to live in a 1-bedroom, but they can't afford to live in a detached and they want to live in like a duplex or triplex, have some space, this kind of middle, this middle zone, this transition that is so vital in Toronto. Well, according to Philip Kochev, a broker at iPro Realty, the city needs more duplex, triplex, stacked townhomes complexes to fill the gap between a saturated high-rise condo market and semis and detached homes selling at sky-high prices. Another way to summarize that is townhomes. We need some more townhomes, right? He argues that existing land and homes could be utilized to build more capacity if the city amended bylaws and fees for modern needs. Our city is archaic, by the way. That could be an alternative to the Ford government's steamroll tactics, the MZOs we've heard about, municipal zoning orders to bypass the city. It's got so many people just jumping ship when it comes to our environment and sell locations like the Foundry to condo developers. How dare you, Mr. Ford? What the heck's the point of an environmental council if you're going to just go past them? Fight, 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 fight. Man, there's this brawl going on right now. I'm not supposed to be enjoying it, but still kind of entertaining. But then they say there's like laneway housing, or you got low-rise multi-unit residences. These are the solutions, and the challenges we face include building costs are not economical when you're talking 4 units in one location as opposed to 100. Makes sense? NIMBYism, not in my backyardism, is strong in desirable neighborhoods, and we see that too in our city, and committees of adjustment, park levy, and development fees are killer. City bylaws are killing us with barriers, man. It's like Free Willy. What a good movie. Something about the ocean. Just so memorable. When I die, I want to be cremated and my ashes scattered in the sea. That way, when my family eats sushi, they'll think of me. So morbid. Airbnb. What about Airbnb? I think this is a great place to put this opportunity to talk, this conversation, because Airbnb creates an automatic supply of inventory that our city needs, regardless of what space that fills. Well, we know that as of January 1st, you're not supposed to have an Airbnb, and they pushed it back a few days, but we're at the end of January, damn it. What's the status? What's the latest? CBC.ca had an article. Toronto condo owner says she's got nowhere after months reporting banned short-term rentals. So we're going to start here, and then we're going to talk about how many illegal units there are. A downtown Toronto condo owner says despite reporting banned short-term rentals operating in her building for months, the bookings continue and include self-isolating international travelers who she alleges sometimes flout Canada's mandatory quarantine order. So people are renting these Airbnbs for their 14-day quarantine. Sounds like a fun building to live in. It's used as a hotel instead of a place where people live. And they said this, in the summer, it was Terminal 3 in the front of our lobby. Terminal 3 obviously referenced to Pearson Airport. Fun terminal to be on a good day. Blogto.com. How many illegal units are there? 17,000. 17 friggin' thousand illegal units in Toronto at a time when they're supposed to be cracking down on these units. My goodness. There have been reports that many listings from Toronto and Airbnb still lack a license number. Worse, some are saying landlords are claiming to be exempt from the regulation, which is not possible. Or they're posting fake license numbers. How creative that is. So they got these calculations. They use the registration data from short-term rentals on Toronto's open data portal, and they combined them with a giant spreadsheet of all Airbnb listings in the city inside Airbnb. Here's what they found. There were 18,200 some odd listings in Toronto, and only 665, or 3.64% of them, had a valid license number. Oh, 3%? Kind of brutal. Another 17,000, that's 95%, had no license listed, while 97 or 0.5% had an invalid license number. So they're just making up a fake number, which some of them are not even creative. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then you've got almost 0.5% claim to have been exempt from the regulation altogether, which there's no exemption. So they're just playing games. The most prolific landlord listing properties with registration numbers that did not match city records had a whopping 39 condos up for rent. Buddy taking total advantage of that system. My goodness. The interim update on the city's short-term rental regulation is slated for February 2nd. Let's see if next week anything changes. But it's not just Toronto that has these Airbnb fees, this MAT tax, municipal, I don't know, tax. That is, I forget the name of it. I apologize. But it has to do with short-term rentals. If you're a short-term rental provider, you got to pay this 4% tax. Well, there's other cities doing it too, including Barrie, Brockville, Greater Sudbury, Mississauga, Ottawa, Waterloo Regional Tourism District, and Windsor. Cities are out here trying to tax Airbnb like Lady Gaga likes her sushi. Rah, 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 rah. Ugh. Let's get on some hot topics, shall we? If you could, at this point in the episode, I'd like to ask, please download the last 5 episodes if you're having fun, if you're learning some stuff, and in honor of the endangered species, that the proceeds from every like on this video, let's get to at least 50, guys, will go to your local tempura house. A house for battered shrimp. We're trying to give back to this community, especially during COVID. Blogto.com article reads, to start our hot topics today, Toronto opens second modular supportive housing building for the homeless. Very good. This is good news. Good news all around. Toronto's second modular home for the city that are experiencing homelessness is now open. Combined, the two, because this is the second one, the 2 housing properties provide a total of 100 new affordable supportive homes. They also, as I was reading this article, they have a lot of support systems in place, protect them from greedy landlords trying to kick them out for no reason, and drug addiction, and a lot of really cool things that are happening. And there's an additional 150 support homes that will be delivered in 2021 as part of phase 2. Quote, through the federal government's national housing strategy, we're striving to reduce chronic homelessness by 50% by 2027 to 2028. This is a good step in the right direction. Hot topic number 2, I want to clarify condos. And I know this can be a separate topic altogether, but I want to summarize. I've pulled a bunch of different articles, different vantage points to talk about exactly what's happening in the condo space. I think there's a ton of confusion. Financialpost.com, Toronto condo rental listings jump 132% as people flee the city. They took the numbers from December, and 1-bedroom condos, listen to this, fell almost 17% rent. Crazy. With 132% increase in supply. Cost for a 2-bedroom dropped about 15%. Dropped. Not up, CMHC. They're backwards at every level, are they not? That's according to Wednesday released, Treb released their stats for that. So the question is, we got rents dropping, we got supply through the roof in December. Now what? That's chaos. And when we look at the review of how we ended 2020, there is a lot of that chaos. But what now? Well, we're going to jump over to a Star article. Toronto condo prices actually dropped at the end of 2020, but experts say that slump will be short-lived. The general manager of Spring Team Real Estate said his group sold 7 condos in the last 2 weeks. 6 of them attracted multiple offers, and 2 had been on the market for more than 90 days. Condo sales activity as of Tuesday was within 5% of pre-COVID levels. Sales activity is booming in January. You're going to see just how much soon. But who's buying these condos? Well, there's 4 groups, they say. First-time buyers, investors, foreign students, and new Canadians. Foreign students and new Canadians, I guess, would be considered 2 separate categories. And you'd say, foreign students? Who the heck wants to come here? Isn't everything closed? Well, to that we say, foreign students are already returning and will be back in force next fall. In fact, with vaccines on the horizon and government spending, its intent to rev up immigration targets, rental demand is already returning to the condo sector. And I believe personally that trend will continue. We got Royal LePage saying that rents have probably hit bottom. This is directly a quote from this article, but he doesn't expect, Soper specifically, doesn't expect they will recover until spring when people are able to move around more. But the point is they're calling a bottom. Royal LePage, thank you for that. What do our viewers think is going on in the market? I'd like to hear from you guys every now and again. Surfat PS2, thank you for your comment. Housing prices and the resumption of the bubble is now going to become a public policy issue. Worst case scenario is the market going higher. Boy, oh boy. That was because that was my worst case scenario in this false prediction of a market crash and then success. Go back and listen to our last podcast. If you missed it, you're going to love it. Andre Jamorko, thank you for your comment. At this point, the market is outpacing buyers and prices are climbing faster than consumers can afford them. My opinion is it's going to continue throughout the springtime. If you can't secure a deal now in Ontario, it may be even harder come the spring market. And I agree. Man. Is that a good thing, the rapid increase in prices? No, I don't even think it is. It's great when you own properties. Don't get me wrong, but something's got to give. Something's got to give. Not to say that the market is going to tumble and that's going to give, but the rapid increase in prices has got to give. Blog Remax has a post here. Remax specifically said, and they were talking about what the recovery would look like, and they're obviously optimistic. Come on, Remax, let's go. Like, you expect Remax to be anything but optimistic. But I like their article because they shared the 2 worst case scenarios one of which we shared, which is CMHC's stress test with their implausible scenario, which has much of a 48% drop in a W-shaped coronavirus-induced recession and recovery, and the government failing to adequately provide financial support. Yeah, okay, all those things are going to happen. All the stars are going to be aligned. I'm sorry, but I'm not buying the anchovy CMHC is selling anymore, especially when the last dish they serve is still pretty raw. Bradley, you got to go easy on CMHC. Okay, you're right. There's a reason soy sauce is forbidden in fights, because you never kick a man down. Kick a man when he's down. That's the brand of... Anyways, I like sushi, okay? I like sushi. RBC also had another prediction that was painting a little bit more of a gloomy picture. I thought, well, you got to balance it out. Here we go. We expect low supply to become a growing constraint, pandemic-induced market churn resulting from changes in housing needs to wane, and a slight rise in longer-term interest rates and material erosion of affordability to cool demand by a few degrees. That's RBC. RBC can see interest rates going up, question mark, maybe, and a demand with affordability cooling down, maybe. All right, but Toronto's housing market's so hot, even the bully bidders are at war. That's a Globe and Mail article, and I'm just going to read one little quote from here before we wrap this sucker up. Right now, we're seeing a ton of crazy bidding wars. That's what they said. Okay, so obviously, what are we at? We're at the end of January, so in the next few days, we're going to be receiving the TREB stats, but I know you guys don't like to wait with everybody else. You like to get the goods early. Me too. That's why we put this podcast together. Scott Ingram, thank you for your post, buddy. We got, 416 condos. Here's what they're saying. There are 112 less actives compared to just Tuesday, nearly a 4% drop. So we see condo inventory dropping hyper quick. But what's also interesting, something interesting they're seeing is looking from January 1st to 26th, which is where the stats are, sales for apartments and townhomes are up 90% year over year. 90%. However, that heat is not showing up in the sold over asking numbers. Interesting. Which were only at 20% last week. Looks like older listings are being absorbed. So the ones that have been sitting for some time now are getting sucked up. What comes next? I guess you guys can make that call. I know what I think. That's up to you. And then when we look at the freehold, let's see what those stats are going to say. Well, January year to date are up 53%. 53% increase in sales. Without any further sales in the last 5 days, not including the last 5 days of January, they've already exceeded the stats of 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020's full month sales. It will be the largest January 416 freehold sales month since 2012 for sure, and probably 2010. So we are on track to have a super hot January month. And today's the last day of January, so wait and see, folks, and we'll report that. I love TREB Stats Day. It's the best. Of course, we can't leave off our hot topics without a COVID update. We just had more than 1,800 new COVID cases in Ontario, and obviously a reduction in vaccine supply, which I think is bigger news, other than this drop in cases, which is great. Ontario is bracing for a drop of up to 25% of its anticipated Moderna vaccines next week, on top of a Pfizer shortage, which would have fully vaccinated more than 116,000 residents in February. Well, maybe some people who thought that the vaccines were overstated, maybe they're getting a little hyper excited. Maybe they're right. Okay, we're going to get into our last and final topic. There is an exodus that's happening right now. People leaving the city. They're like, where the heck do we want to go? Somewhere else, right? Somewhere else. Well, we want to be able to answer this question. What small towns are people actually moving to when they're fleeing Toronto? And you could, if you just make a blanket statement all over the place, you would be accurate. But there are clearly some small towns that are doing better than others, according to a Zoocasa broker. They're a brokerage and an analysis firm. They had a new report that came out. Quote, municipalities furthest from the city of Toronto generally saw the largest jumps in growth rate of home sales. In the condo apartment market, condo dense regions like the city of Toronto and Peel region experienced declines in condo apartment sales. However, prices noted a slight year-over-year increase. Slight increase. But it's not just Toronto. It's any of these like really tight hubs, right? Brampton as an example. No one wants to be in these little cooped up apartment buildings, and that is really what's leading this trend. But specific cities, specific regions. Number one, Simcoe County, sales are up 21% and prices are up 17%. Woo! Town of Innisfil saw the steepest real estate gains with year-over-year rising 36%. Wow. Increase in sales. What about Durham? Durham region, average price across the region is up 117,000 right now. Not a bad return for 1 year. Skugog Brock, I saw home sales increase by 35% and 32% respectively. Pickering, Uxbridge, and Oshawa also saw sales rise by more than 20%. But the most people that are moving, when we look at from a city perspective, would be York Region's municipality of King. Listen to this. House sales increase of 75%. The average price in King right now is just under $1.8 million. But if you can't afford a $1.8 million home, I feel bad for you, son. There's still hope for you. There's still hope. Like Obi-Wan said to Luke when he saw him struggling with the chopsticks, use the fork, Luke. That reminds me, side story. That reminds me when I tried to teach my grandma how to use chopsticks. She accidentally made a sweater. So we're going to look, if you can't afford the 1.8, at more affordable options available to you across Ontario. There are a number of cities that you can move to that you get more bang for your buck. Here's the first one. Kingston. Average price of a residential home in Kingston is $464,000 compared to the whopping just under $1 million in Toronto. Windsor is great too. $406,000 is actually way up from a year previously. And the other one that they mentioned is Sudbury at $311,000 per year. And our friends all the way up in the boonies called Thunder Bay, their average home price is just under $250,000 on average. Not bad. Not bad. Seems relatively affordable. And Scott Ingram posted, this is a really cool post to kind of wrap that up for us. Top 20 cities and towns seeing a recent influx of people per U-Haul. So what U-Haul did, tell me this isn't cool, the number of inbound trucks versus outbound trucks. People pick it up and they go there. So that gives you an idea of where people are going. Whether they're coming from one place or another is irrelevant, but we can see where that inflow is happening. And so let me give you some of the highlights here in Ontario. North Bay, number 1, North Bay. Number 3, Kingston. Number 4, Belleville. Number 5, Barrie Orillia. We got Sudbury, number 6. Then we got Chatham, number 9. Sarnia, number 10. Peterborough, St. Thomas, Brantford. And that's everything from Ontario. But these just give you some insights on where people are headed. I'll tell you, Toronto's not on the list. It's simply not there. Because that's where people are going from, let's be honest. Hopefully you guys are learning some stuff today. And if you could, please hit that like, subscribe button. We're going to continue to have lots of fun. And in the theme of sushi, because obviously sushi is a thing right now on this show. If you don't like sushi, let's be honest, something's wrong with you. Or maybe you're just going to the wrong restaurants. Maybe you're not going to the ones I am. The one I go to, the shop I go to, oh, so good. So good. I think they actually have Toronto's greatest sushi chef, like number 1. And you know when he began training how to make sushi? 2.5. Please, guys, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're going to continue to have some fun. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Take care and keep it real.